Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Post in Black, where we celebrate Black excellence behind the lens. We are thrilled and excited to have you as we start out our 5th season. Thank you for all the support and love. And this is a very special season because we are now sponsored by the Dolby Institute and Avid. So thank you to the Dolby Institute and Avid for sponsoring Post in Black. We could not do this without you, and we're excited to bring you some amazing episodes. Like today's episode, we have with us Andrew Roberts, VFX supervisor. Andrew, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
No, it's amazing, and just a small world because we recently saw each other, and when this episode airs, you know, people are going to say recently, but we saw each other at the Oscars of all places, and it was just crazy. So it's amazing to bump into you, and now you're on the show.
Yeah, and in fact, I've followed your Instagram posts and the podcast for a while, and so walking into the theater with my wife and son, and then just seeing you, just immediately was like, oh, that's the Post in Black guy.
Yeah,
so it was great. Yeah.
It was crazy, and I saw your face, and it's like, you see the thumbnail of somebody's face, and I was like, I know you. So it was awesome. Well, we're happy to have you here, and as always with the show, we have an icebreaker for you.
Okay.
If you had the ability to have your own TED Talk, what would your TED Talk be about and why? On anything outside of VFX, I should mention.
Anything outside of VFX?
Or post, yeah.
Wow. That's such a great question. What would my TED Talk be about?
Yeah.
It would have to do with owning your space in this world and feeling comfortable.
Yeah.
Particularly with my background, my parents are from the Caribbean. Mum's from Barbados.
Yeah.
My father's from Carriacou. It's one of the Grenadines.
Yeah.
And I was born in London, England.
Yeah.
And then emigrated to the States.
Wow.
So when I moved here, it was just my wife and myself, and I didn't really have much of a community. Yeah. And that was something I had to work to build that we'll probably talk about in a little bit. So it just took me some time to figure out how to sort of own my space and feel comfortable about myself and lean on my history and build a network. So I think it would be that sense of ownership and self-confidence. It's probably be surrounding that.
That's really good. Did you start right now? Did you just start the TED Talk now? Because I was tapped in. I was locked in. I mean, that's powerful, and I think that's something that we need more of, especially in this day and age. You talked about your culture and your background, being a man, being Black man. That's a lot, and owning our space and just feeling confident and comfortable in that enough. Because some days, I'm like, how do we not scream? How do we not scream? You driving to get here, I'm sure you saw a lot of things to scream about.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Driving on the freeways. No but yeah, that was amazing. And you kind of tapped into the next part already. You told us a little bit about yourself. But yes, where are you from? How did you grow up and how did you end up in Los Angeles?
I'm from London. I was born in South London, SE6, in an area near Brixton. It's called New Cross is where I was born. Okay. My parents are from the West Indies, but they met in London. And my father... He's one of 5 brothers and 3 sisters, and it's myself and my 3 siblings. So we were a family of 6. Wow. Grew up in London and born and raised and educated in the UK. I wasn't really too sure what my path was initially. Didn't really have that guidance at school. There was certainly a lot of influence from Dad. He was a carpenter. Okay. And so myself and my brothers and my sister really learned those skills about making things from Dad. He was also a musician. He and his brothers were in a calypso group. So we grew up with around music. He played the guitar, he made steel drums, he played the tenor saxophone, and music was mandatory for all of us. We all had to at least play the piano. Okay. And then if there are other instruments, I was in a school band with the tuba. My one brother played the French horn, another played the drums. My sister just focused on piano, and she still plays today. She composes, and she's amazing. So,
my goodness, that's a talented family right there. Just starting there.
Yeah, and we were just we were around music and creativity. Yeah, and so that was something that I think I just took for granted that sort of families had that, but it was a rich environment. But Dad being a carpenter, I just grew up with a very sort of basic but real sense of design. You know, we would see Dad just sort of sketch something out on, even if it was a piece of wood and he was kind of designing a go-kart for us or an extension to the house, or teaching my brothers and I how to cut a dovetail joint or mix concrete. That we would see a concept then become reality.
Wow.
And so that was something that was just sort of part of my DNA. And it wasn't until years later I was with my brothers and we were talking about each of our careers and the paths we've taken that we were able to trace it back to Dad. And one brother is a surveyor and he's got buildings across the city. And another brother is a professor at London University teaching robotics and computer-aided design and machining. And I'm in VFX, but it all started from that design, those concepts of creating things. So that was sort of the foundation from the family. I actually, when I went to school, I was doing computer programming, systems analysis, and that's what I took in college. I took a degree in that side of things. There was still the visual side. I did graphical communication, design and technology, and those things I really enjoyed. But I wasn't really sure what the path would be with those skills of being able to design or be an architect. So I got my qualifications as a programmer. And I ended up at an architect's firm where I was designing software that would calculate cabling. And if you had 5 people in a room, then it would calculate sort of how much network cable you would need. And then depending on where the server might be, if you moved it around, then it would recalculate, okay, now you need 500 feet.
Oh, man.
And so at that firm, in order for me to really be able to write code effectively, they wanted me to spend some time learning the drafting software. And so I started to get into this program. Was called CADvance. And I realized I really enjoyed the graphics more than writing the code. And I was able to transition from that company to Autodesk, which was such a great opportunity for me. They initially hired me as a quality control, just testing software. So I'd run these tests on programs. There was something that my mother used to say to us constantly, which was about being industrious, always looking to do more, looking to see where you can help. And this role that I had, we would be inserting these 5 1/4 floppy disks and running these programs and sort of waiting for a while and seeing what the results were. And once I got the hang of it after a few weeks, I realized that I was sort of idle, that I wasn't really doing a whole lot with my time. And so I reached out to the boss of the QC department. I said, is there anything else I can do? Can I help with anything else? And she really appreciated that. And she mentioned that at Autodesk, software would be developed in the States, and then it would be sent to the various locales, to Asia and Europe and Africa. And then each country would do what we call localize the documents. So in the UK, we'd put the U back in color and change to British building standards. And she said, can you just do a search and replace and just update these docs so that we can get them printed for the UK market? And so then my role shifted from doing the quality control testing. I became the first technical writer for Autodesk in the UK office. So they sent me on various writing courses and learning how to break down complex subjects and to convey them simply. And that was such an interesting period for me. I always enjoyed English. I always enjoyed literature. And this ability to take these areas that I was interested in now and help communicate through writing was really quite refreshing.
You have mentioned so many different things, and just in terms of the complexity of all of them. I feel like there's a lot of different paths that you could have went down and been amazing at each one of them. But that's just an incredible story and background. And you're not even finished with it, but just that start is really impactful. What do you feel like was like the tipping point? You realize, well, I'll say this. I do like the fact that you said I felt idle, and so I asked, because you could have just sat there.
Right.
And that's something that sticks out to me. You knew right away and you acted on that impulse. What is something else that kind of tipped you off to say, maybe there's a different path?
I think it's to keep him busy. But then it's also trying to pursue something that sparks an interest in me. And I was always, at that time, I was looking to grow, and I hadn't figured out what my path was. So I don't even think I realized I was looking for it, but that I was trying to just put my energy into whatever I was doing at the time and become as good as possible. And then if something else caught my interest, then I would divert to that and then really try and get good at that. So I think it was that desire to excel and learn and grow. Just sort of build up my tool belt, as it were.
That's powerful. I mean, how does that start take you to, and fast forwarding, we may not be able to, but fast forwarding to now, VFX supervisor, working on the amazing projects that you have, you can go down the list of the commercials, Super Bowl, Aquaman, and obviously the creator, which, you guys were nominated for an Academy Award, the Oscar, how do you get to this point from that?
That change really was Autodesk.
Yeah, okay,
so then, being exposed to other graphics software.
I see.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so I was sent on an overseas writing assignment. So this is still as a technical writer, but then they sent me to Sausalito to cover some documentation for a version of the program.
Yeah.
And I got introduced to software designer Gary Yost. And he was creating a program that's now known as 3ds Max.
Oh, wow.
And they were just at the very genesis of that. It was the beta of version 1. And we just got talking, and he said, hey, we're into a lot of the same things. Take a version of this program home and just, when you get back to the UK, test it and let me know what you think. And so that became a real sharp divergent path for me, where now I'm taking these architect plans and layouts from AutoCAD, but I'm bringing them into this new program and adding texture and shading and light and movement. And it was a world that I wasn't aware of prior to this idea of motion and animation and I'd seen Pixar shorts.
Right.
And so now I'm realizing, this is the program that they use
That's
for
what
that.
they use to do that. Because I'm intrigued, because if you don't know about something, how do you even make that choice to get into it? But then you see it and you're like, okay, like what is the skill set? Like, you already had some of the tools. Mm-hmm. Was it just practicing on your own at this time, since it's the beta version and all of this? It's not anything that you can go look up to see how somebody else did it. You have to kind of figure it out.
Right, yeah. There were no schools, and there wasn't really an internet at that point, because this is around 1990 that I was introduced to this software. And so it was a lot of late nights just trying out different variations on this program. And okay, how do you build something? How do you get shadows? How do you get motion? What's motion blur? What is reflections? You know, and just trying out all these different things. I mean, it was just a whole new world that I threw myself into. So from that, I was able to shift from the writing to now supporting the program as a 3D support person. Then there was a lot of customers that would call up. Mm-hmm. And so then I was doing phone support. I was also helping with trade shows and doing presentations that you might see at a SIGGRAPH or a game developer conference. Yeah. And I got introduced to a games company who needed someone to help train their artists. And it was a big leap, because being at Autodesk, I'm sort of inside the company, and so I'm right alongside the developers. They've got this whole plan of the different programs they're releasing, and this idea of sort of leaving that
comfort. Yeah, that's what it is too. Yeah.
It was a leap, but I was really excited at the possibilities of what could I do out in the world. And having spoken to the owner of this company, he had visions where he was, so this is now where it's sort of Sega Genesis, it's the side scrollers, right? Yeah. It's all 2D. But this guy was quite visionary. And he said, I know that in the future, there are going to be 3D environments that people play in and move around in. And I'd love for you to help train the artists to learn these tools and to help us build these worlds. And you
had the faith you had the faith and the belief that, you're right, I'm getting on that train with you. Yeah. I guess my thing about that for you is you're getting into this world, and you have these mentors, but is there's like, they're asking you, or people that you're working alongside, they're asking you to train somebody else. Yeah. What is it that you're sharing? And then is there anybody else that looks like you in this space? Or is that even a thought process? You're like, I'm just more about the information. Right. You know what I mean? Because it's like sometimes we're excited about something, and then we see people who are, we have a common interest in, or a commonality with, but when we're the only one in the space, there's sometimes there could be hesitation.
For sure, yes. Well, so on the first part of your question, because my role at that point at Autodesk was helping to instruct and teaching people how to use a program, that was my in, where I didn't feel comfortable as an artist at that point. I really didn't consider myself an artist, but I knew the program inside out. And so that was a sense of, okay, I can walk them through how to, sort of create things and how to use these various tools. And little did I know that I would really grow into my life as an artist by being exposed to all these other fantastic, amazing people.
Yeah.
London is quite multicultural. So
a little bit different than
there are similarities though.
Yeah.
Still an ethnic minority.
Right.
And it's something that you're aware of and you live with, and you deal with. So there wasn't a huge amount of diversity in terms of seeing other Black people at that company. But getting used to moving in spaces and traveling around and giving presentations, you develop a thick skin.
Yeah.
That's some acceptance of
what is and what isn't.
Yeah. I have my community, I've got my loved ones, I've got the people I grew up with. But then now this is work, and I deal with, I deal with those issues in the workspace separately.
Yeah, no, and I'm curious that because obviously, we talk specifically from our perspective in the States and what happens here and then in Los Angeles, but there could be things that you are more aware of or privy to, or maybe saying, well, we didn't experience this, but here's what we did experience in London.
Yeah.
Jumping from London to LA, what is that like? Because obviously you're doing those things there. You're brought on to kind of teach and bring people into a new world with a visionary. What was the move? What was the job or opportunity that kind of brought you to the States? Were you in LA first?
Right. So I was at this games company.
Right.
And I met a designer who had an opportunity to work for Warner Brothers. So he moved, he relocated to the States.
Yeah.
And he'd been working in the games industry. And this is around the late 90s, sort of the dot-com era, when sort of investors were really into like trying things out.
Yeah.
And so he called me up one day. I was working on commercials and music videos. And he said, Andrew, I've got this opportunity for you. Let's start a company. I found an investor, and you wouldn't just go on this ride with me, And I'd been married for about 3-4 years at that point.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, we were both freelancing in our respective fields, and we said, let's give it a go. Like it could just be a little adventure for a few years.
To see.
That was in 97. That we said, let's
what an adventure.
Yeah, let's go for it. And we figured we'd try it out for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Maybe see if something got going, and then return and settle back down in London and start a family. But that was the beginning. Was relocating to LA as a founder of this company with my friend Koss.
Wow.
The investor, as did happen around that time, didn't see a quick return on his money, so he was like, I'm out.
But you were here.
Yes, and I'd made enough contacts where I was able to then adjust and pivot. Say, okay, I'm no longer a CEO, I'm no longer a co-owner, but I have these skills as an artist. So roll up my sleeves, get behind a desk, and just get to work as an artist.
I see.
Yeah.
You speak to the video games and the commercials, and then obviously you've worked on the narrative side.
Yeah.
What is the biggest difference from your perspective, or is there a similarity to that? Just technical? Is it more bigger budget, more more work, longer hours, or is there something technical that's different that you've noticed?
Actually, now within games, the games industry, the budgets exceed film. But back when I was within games, it was a relatively immature industry, and so you could be working on a game property for years and then it not get released for whatever reason. And so it was, I would say it was an immature industry at that point. And there were certain restrictions in terms of just physical limitations. So the game engines that existed at that time, you were limited to the number of polygons or the texture resolution or the frame rate. And so having done sort of animations and graphics, and now coming into this world where, build a character, he's got to look real, but, it's got to fit inside this box. It can only be sort of 500 polygons. It was frustrating. It was an interesting technical challenge to sort of get it to move as fluidly or get this environment to look as realistic as possible within those constraints.
Right.
But my memory of the games industry back at that time was
a little bit different.
It was different. It was those constraints. I did love the idea of building this imaginary world and then giving the players, the free reign to roam about,
to go,
and having various paths where now, depending on your decision, which way will the game take you, versus the narrative on the rails.
On the rails, yeah. Can you talk a little bit, because now we're going to jump into, you talk about building a world. I'd seen The Creator, recently we watched it, and I think when you watch things a second time, even a third time, it hits differently, and there's so much that you notice.
Right.
Can you talk about crafting that world and how you even got brought on to that project in particular?
Sure. I work for Industrial Light and Magic.
Exactly.
And I've been with them for ILM for about 3.5 years now. And I was coming to the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right.
I was working on that project as a virtual production supervisor and what they call a brain bar supervisor, where you're helping sort of oversee the technical back end, sort of using the real-time engine to create these worlds and to display them on the walls of the volume. And so I was coming to the end of that. And the leadership at ILM knew that I was really eager to get on set, that I was, I'd love to do more as an on-set visual effects supervisor.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that too, about on set versus not on set.
Sure.
So, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
And so they're very intentional about what they call casting for shows. And so the interest and the skill set, and then your interest in the role as well as your interest in certain subject matter. And so they reached out to me and said, we feel like this job would be a good fit for you. And they knew that I loved sci-fi and that I'd been on set from previous roles at different vendors. And so the question was, will you be willing to go on location for a number of months, because they were going to be traveling through Southeast Asia. And initially there were 5 countries that we were going to be traveling around. And, so the question that our chief creative officer, Rob Breedow, he said, is that something you're able to do? Give it some thought, speak to your family, but we think you would be a great fit for that.
So, you got to talk to the wife.
Yes, that's right. And my wife, Carla, who I've known pretty much like all my life. I've known her since she was 5 and I was 7.
That's wow.
Yeah,
That's
so we grew up just around the corner from each other and went to the same place of worship. And so we know each other very well.
Yeah.
And there was an agreement really that while our son was growing up and through adolescence and just going through puberty, that, we would both be present. And so there were opportunities for me to travel. And I did for one job where I went to China. I was the supervisor and, we did some drone work on set for a couple of months. But I was really aware of that distance and, things happening, just that I wasn't around for him to be able to talk to me about. And
right, for sure.
Yeah, I really sort of like kept that to a minimum during Miles.
That's beautiful. That's important.
Yeah. He's 23 now. So like we've done
he was like, I can get up out of here. Yeah,
exactly.
You good. We can FaceTime. Yeah.
So Miles was 21 when this opportunity came up. And so that was the big conversation of, okay, well, that's not an issue,
for sure.
And we just sort of figured out how we would sort of navigate the household at that time. And so had her support. She was all for it. And so it's like, let's go.
Man, I'll jump in real quick. I think that's beautiful, and it's a powerful testament, because a lot of people really want to know. You talked about it when we did the icebreaker, how to navigate life, the balance, family. I do want a family, but I want this. I want partnership, but I want this. And it's sometimes we feel like we have to choose. And so when you have good communication and somebody that works with you together, I think that's encouragement for anybody out there, that it is possible when you have the right team.
Definitely, yeah. And I grew up with both of my parents present. They both worked, but that was something that I just took for granted, that I came home and mum and dad were there the whole time.
We do.
And so I just definitely we both wanted that for Miles, that we were both around and available to him. So kudos to my parents for setting that example. Both of our parents for setting that example. It was a blessing to be able to do that and find opportunities locally
to do,
while Miles was growing up, and then to sort of like embrace these other opportunities and travel a little.
But then obviously this project presented itself. You were able to do, and what was that like? Being on set.
It was awesome. It was really great. Yeah. So initially I had an interview with Gareth Edwards, the director, and his
the writer,
executive,
right?
the writer and director and producer. That's right.
Producer. He was all three. I was like, I was seeing his credits again. I was like, wait, everything?
Yeah. And more. I mean, he really did a lot of design. More. He really, which I think is why it's such a unique project, is because Gareth was so involved in it.
Right.
So I met with him and then his executive producer, Kiri Hart. And we had a great conversation where we spoke about our interests. Gareth spoke about his creative influences for the film. I made a number of notes of films that I'm going to need to watch because he said his influences were Blade Runner, Apocalypse Now, and Baraka, which was a film I hadn't seen. But
I've heard the name, but I haven't seen that. I know the name, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It's sort of like slice of life. It's it's a non-narrative piece, but just you're seeing footage of different people in different parts of the world, sort of going about their lives, and it's just edited in a beautiful way with an amazing score. And it's sort of almost like a meditational piece. Yeah. And so when I went back and rewatched the other two films and then saw that, I was like, I wonder how it's going to come together. His film is going to bring all of those elements together, but it totally does. The Baraka element is when you're seeing moments like the robot sifting through rice, or the old lady walking up the pathway, or the old robot walking up the pathway with its arm around the little kid. And there are other things like that, a person on a bike or sifting through the rice paddy field. It's those moments that sort of add some sort of cinematic scope and some texture and some depth beyond just a narrative component to it. So he really was able to bring those together. But Gareth really did sort of explain to me that he really wanted this film to be about the actors, about their performance. With him having been a visual effects artist in the past, he had a level of comfort with it where he knew where we needed to put the money and spend the energy and where we didn't. One phrase that Gareth used was, I don't want the tail to wag the dog. Like and as you know, being on film sets and familiar with this world, that often when you're making a film or shooting a commercial or TV show, there's all of this other stuff, right, that is necessary for supporting the film. And at times, those things can get in the way.
They can.
Right? Like you're about ready to roll, and then someone's like, oh, I've lost signal from Q-Take. Oh, hold on, sorry, hang on a second. And Gareth specifically mentioned that, and he was like, if we lose signal, I'm not stopping. We shoot when I'm ready, when the actors are ready, we'll do that. He wanted that free-flowing movement that if he wanted to reframe and, sort of move and shoot in 180 degrees or 360, he didn't want to be told, okay, well, you can't shoot in that direction because that's Video Village. And, these are the restrictions, He really wanted that freedom.
That's beautiful,
and so he sort of prepared me for that. And John Knoll, who's one of our creative officers at ILM, he was a Gareth visual effects supervisor for Rogue One. And so John was also familiar with the way that Gareth works. Long takes. Sometimes he'll roll for 35 minutes before he cuts.
Wow.
And he'll just have his actors reset, and then he'll adjust his framing, he'll adjust his angle very slightly, just trying to find the perfect angle to capture that connection. And so he said, you'll be rolling for a while. He's going to want to point the camera wherever, and you need to be there as a support for him. Bear witness to what's happening on set, capture what you can, HDRIs, do the balls and charts and any scans. So grab as much information in order to allow the team at ILM to do their work, but then also be there alongside Gareth. So if something comes up, as it invariably does, you lose a location, there's a change in weather, whatever might happen, to help him figure out, okay, how are we going to get this shot, and how can visual effects support him? So it was that dual role. So
watching the film, I was just trying to count, and I was like, no, that's not possible. So I was like, I have to ask you in person. There's so much VFX. I almost feel like where I probably have a better chance of trying to watch where there wasn't VFX, because there's so much. What does a day like that on set look like and then feel like in post compared to previous projects?
Right. Well, one of the major differences in the approach that Gareth took was that a lot of those decisions as to the environment, the assets, the buildings, those things would happen in post. And so we filmed for, the 5 months in Thailand and then travel around to the other locations. And then Gareth had the time to do his edit. He had the 10 weeks to get his locked edit.
Yeah.
And now on other productions, they may say, okay, well, we know we need a city and we know we need these other things and let's get going on them.
Yeah.
And we're not exactly sure where he's going to shoot, so let's build this thing from every angle. And you can end up putting hundreds of man hours burning it, building this thing that's never
not going to be used.
Right.
That is so good. That's important.
Yeah.
That's
and
really
that was
good.
the key difference. And it's sort of, when you say it out loud, it kind of makes sense that, why would you not do it that way? But generally because of schedules, and because of when there's a release date, but how much time needs to be worked on it, that you kind of need to get going.
Yeah.
So with that approach that Gareth took, it was really about looking at the final frame that he selected and then saying, we're only going to see this city from this angle. Let's have our production designer. This was another key difference. The production designer, James Klein, who helped with the look of the film during pre-production, and he was present throughout principal photography, where we'd get on Zoom calls with him.
Yeah.
Normally, when you wrap and you say, okay, we're all done, is when the production designer is off to his next thing, because I've designed the elements, it's captured in camera,
and it's there.
And then he's off. James Klein stayed on through the duration of post.
Oh, wow.
And so now that Gareth has edited the film, he could look at a frame and then do paint overs to say, okay, well, based on this hill, based on the natural elements in frame, it would be really interesting if we kind of take an influence from that and let's have the building kind of shape around it this way. So he would do paint overs. He and Gareth would have these Zoom calls where they're interactively designing, just in 2D, painting in Photoshop. And so they would iterate really quickly and get something that Gareth was really happy with. Then he would take that, and very cheaply, right? You're just 2D drawings.
Yeah.
Then he would pass that to ILM once Gareth had approved the 2D look, and then they would build that. And they wouldn't really spend a lot of time building this complex asset from all 3D. Often they would sort of do just something that just worked from that angle. So there might be projections, it might be 2.5D. They'd be sort of efficient, maybe take some artwork that the art department and James Klein's artists had created, and take that and project and build 3D and add textures where necessary, but being a lot more efficient, knowing we're never going to see this side, we're never looking around the back, we only need to make it look beautiful from this angle.
Very, very precise, very detailed and intentional.
Right.
And I think, not even having met him, but maybe from experience, saying, I'm not going to waste money here. I'm not going to waste time here. Let's do it this way, because I did it that way before, thinking I was helping myself and actually ended up wasting.
Right. Exactly.
That's what it sounds like. And it's also encouraging, like, really, very good use of the budget. I mean, it was, again, watching it very recently, and I'm just looking at the detail. Yeah. Because I think watching things from an actor's perspective, I'm watching for the story, I'm looking at the actor and the character, and then watching it again, and then I'm noticing everything else that I was like, I can let my mind just like move freely.
Yeah.
And just like page, I'm like, well, look at the detail in the mountains and the water when they're coming around, and wow, and wait, how did they do this? And the robots, and even, I mean, there was so much,
so many layers,
so many layers of detail, very specific note taking. How important is that as a VFX artist, as a post-production professional, just to make sure that you don't miss something doesn't slip through the cracks.
Yeah, it's critical, very important. And so there would be, each day that I was on set, I'd have my iPad slung over my shoulder where I've got FileMaker Pro, and there's a certain template that the VES, the Visual Effects Society, have released for people to be able to take information about what lens was used, and the distance from camera, and what is the action, and you can sort of take screenshots. Yeah. So we would record that information for every setup and every take. And in addition to that, I'd have another camera that had a 14mm lens. So it's pretty wide angle that would allow me to capture the placement of the camera and the actors and the lights to just get a sense of what that setup is. And then the ball and charts, the chrome ball that will capture the reflections, and the gray side that will capture the main light sources. So we'd roll on those for any VFX scenes, or whenever the robots or Alfie, the simulants, whenever they would be in frame. Yeah. So I would do that typical setup that you would normally see on a VFX heavy scene. So that was generally the approach, because of course, when a frame is shot and then it's sent back to the artist, they'll just see the frame of you and what's behind you. They've no idea that, we've got this soft key that's out of frame, or any other objects within the frame that are contributing to the light that represents you.
Yeah.
And so it's shooting the HDRI, that high dynamic range image, 360, that then allows us to put a digital object beside you and it received the same lighting and it looked like it was just there the whole time, that it was filmed at the same time you were filmed. So I would capture that information, take those notes. But another important note-taking element was being there beside Gareth and observing what he was doing with the camera. Because Gareth operates 99% of the time.
Okay.
Which is unique for a director, right?
Yeah.
Because he has a documentarian style, and he likes to he knows what he needs. If we're close on a group of people and then one breaks away, he knows whether he needs to stay with the group and their reaction or follow the person. Yeah. So it just made sense for him to do that. But at times, Gareth might be sort of following a group and then he would tilt up to the sky. Or he would sort of, he would make sound effects, which was always interesting. So you might see him pan and
Yeah.
So I'd observe that. I would take some notes, and then when he would cut, I'd then go over to him and say, Gareth, what are you seeing there? What are you panning to? And then he would explain, oh, that's where Special Forces, one of those jets is going to fly by. Or based on what he said, we're going to pan up to Nomad. And so having someone who's so intentional and that he's planned it was super helpful, because he's already seen almost the final film.
And it's someone that sees it but has clear direction. Yes. Because sometimes you work with people and it could be a situation where it's not as clear. Like they're very adamant about going a direction. We're like, are you sure? But for them to communicate and everybody understand and clearly want to be on the same page.
Yeah.
I mean, everything you've mentioned with like, I'm excited to be on set, and you talk about 5 months. Advice that you would give for someone preparing for a project like this. It's not every day that somebody's going to get the creator or something be on 5 months on set in Thailand or somewhere else. But when they're preparing for a project of this magnitude, what are some tools they should maybe have in their belt to prepare themselves for this? We talked about note taking, we talked about that, but is there anything else in particular that you had that you say, this is good to have, or I didn't know I needed this until I was there?
Right. It's amazing how much you can now just have on a phone, like our smartphones, these amazing filmmaking devices.
Yeah. And
so I definitely would recommend sort of research into what apps will just help me.
Yeah.
And so there was a Sunseeker app that would allow, I think, any filmmaker or a post person be able to just plan, like, okay, what time does sun set and where does the sun go down and how is that going to affect my shot?
That's so good, yeah.
Now, we were hoping to have a LiDAR scanner present on set, but just because of the travel and some other logistics, that wasn't possible. Yeah. But there are apps with the latest phones that allow you to do LiDAR scanning.
And can you explain to that for somebody who doesn't even know what that is?
For sure. Yeah. So the app that I was using, it's called Scaniverse.
Okay.
And essentially, you just go into scanning mode, and as you're moving around and you're pointing so it's almost like you're taking a picture or shooting video.
Yeah.
And as you're moving around and adjusting your angle of a certain object, that it's sending light and bouncing back and capturing literally as a 3D object, the geometric properties. And so if we were scanning this space, it would then see where the wall and where the floor are, not only the geometry, but also the texture. And so we would get, the print on the curtain and the kind of texture that's on the carpet. And so as you move around and capture those details, it builds a 3D representation of where you are. And then you're able to save that and export it to a 3D scene. And so for the guys that are doing a match move, they're looking at the camera that's been filmed and they're trying to recreate, they're trying to track that camera and recreate what a digital version of what the live action camera was doing. Yeah. Having a 3D representation of the scene is super helpful, so that they can look at the plate and they can say, okay, well, I see the chair there, so let me bring my model in and line it up. And that can really be super helpful. And so there are apps that are free that allow you to scan.
That's so helpful, because there are people who are intrigued, but don't know where to start.
Right.
And don't even know that that's a possibility to have and just play around with.
Yes.
I mean, you saying that, it's like, it's crazy. I don't know if you even noticed, but like everything that you said is actually full circle to how you started. We did that, the carpenter.
Right.
And then trying and being intrigued.
Yes.
And, piano, saxophone, brother doing this, sister doing that. Oh, I'm working here, but I'm not feeling. Let me go ask. And, oh, there's an app. Well, how do you know? You look, you search.
Right.
You know, my mom used to say this all the time to me when I look for something in the refrigerator. She's like, it's not going to jump out at you.
Right.
You got to move that out the way, and it's right there.
It. Yeah.
So you look for it, and you can find it. I'm very curious, and I know we have so much to talk about, and obviously we have to do multiple things. Two things we always want to just point out, you know, obviously with us being Post and Black,
yes,
and we highlight, you know, Black people working in post-production. Can you talk about, you know, just how it's been for you navigating this industry, obviously even with your history, but navigating and then making an impact and then even mentoring and giving back, you know, trying to help others. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. So navigating the industry, I think initially, particularly being an immigrant and moving here and not having that network that we spoke about, initially my goal was just about trying to do excellent work, develop a reputation, to get hired at other places and building up a portfolio. There was a shift for me that happened. I went to a presentation where they were talking about the work on the second Matrix movie.
Yeah.
And I went into this theater and there was a group of people that walked up on stage and there was one Black man that walked up there too. And I didn't really know anyone at that time in the industry. And so to see a brother who was the animation supervisor for that film and just to hear him talk about the work he'd done at such a high level was something that was really inspiring to me. I got to work with him a few years later. His name is Lyndon Barrois. And I got to work with him on The Tree of Life. And then we worked together at Prime Focus on Sucker Punch as well.
Wow.
And through Lyndon, he really introduced me to a lot of other Black people in the industry and a group that wears the Black unicorns. That we've helped to support each other, occasionally work with each other, which is always awesome. If they have sort of projects on the side or if they need someone who you can give recommendations, then that side of actually collaborating is always beautiful. But and recommendations to say, oh, I need a producer on this. Is there someone you can recommend? And that's been beautiful to actually have people come and support me who've been recommended by other colleagues. But then also just that sense of belonging. And even if you're not working on the same show, to be able to periodically sit down with a group of people that have, you know, the same interests, the same background, you know, some of the same struggles as you, and just to share, you know, like how are you doing? Maybe just a listening ear can be the thing you need to just help you keep going. So that's been beautiful to just be part of that community, part of that network. And then on the mentoring, that's been a real privilege. Getting to this stage in my career where
to give back,
exactly to give back. I'm currently working with the Film Academy through their Gold Rising program.
Wow,
that's really been a privilege. To meet people from underrepresented backgrounds and then open some doors for them, help them avoid some of the struggles and things I sort of had to figure out, to be able to say, okay, this is how I would move. This is how I've dealt with that. And it can be basic things like, you know, this is how you construct a resume. This is how you would ask someone out for coffee so that you guys can have a conversation. This is how you would put together a bid. If someone asks you to do work, to make sure that you're not undervaluing yourself.
Let's talk about that. Right? That's real.
And so along with, giving critique on someone's reel and, you know, talking to them about new tools, that's great to help build that knowledge, but just some of those other soft skills as well. There's things that I just took for granted and assumed that, I'm sure, well, everyone knows this, but then when you have a conversation with someone and you see the light bulb you go off, then you realize the knowledge that you've accumulated over the years. And so that's been a real blessing and privilege to be able to try and pass on some of that knowledge, some of those gems.
It's so important. It's a blessing and a privilege to have you on the podcast. I mean, this has been amazing. There's so many gems, information, and just the wisdom, I think, that comes from time. And what you said about having a community, the reason why we do Post and Black is really to highlight people like yourself and to build a community, because it's like a fresh breath of air. It's like an exhale. You know what I mean? Like we can work in all spaces. We can work with all types of people, but sometimes just nobody gonna get you like your wife. Right. You know what I mean? Just to breathe. They're like, hey, how was the day? Man, it was just, you get me. You know what I mean? Talking to your siblings. And that's what it's like in this industry sometimes when you see somebody that works in the same field as you, who maybe, you know, y'all don't work in the same project, anything, maybe not with the same director or producers, but you can have that eye contact to be like, yeah, we need to wrap. So you have something coming up you wanted to share with the people.
Absolutely, yes. So I've been working with a group called Visage.
Yeah.
There was a matte painter, Yvonne Muindi, that I got to work with at Scanline. She was a matte painting supervisor on Aquaman.
Yeah.
And she's originally from Kenya. She's since moved back to Kenya and set up a production company.
Yeah.
And they're really focused on education and with sponsorship from the government.
Yeah.
They have their first graphics conference.
Wow.
Visual effects. They really just want to help with education.
Yeah.
And just the birth of visual effects in Kenya. That's called Visage. And I'm going to have the privilege of flying out there and giving a presentation and keynote speech for them. When I heard that I was getting to do that, I reached out to another group of people that I've been working with over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And that's a team called Afro VFX.
Oh, man.
And they're based in Côte d'Ivoire. And they've been really helping to just give sponsorship and give courses for free to students in the city of Abidjan who would like to sort of become artists, whether that's in TV, commercials, features.
Yeah.
So I've been helping them with their curriculum and just helping build up that knowledge. And so I mentioned, I'm going to be in Kenya in a couple of weeks. I'd love to see you. And they said, oh, well, we have a conference and we'd love for you to also speak there. And that's called Lisolo. And so that's at the beginning of next week. So I'll be flying out Friday to the motherland. I'll get to go to Côte d'Ivoire and Kenya. And it's beautiful to see these pockets of interest in different parts of Africa where people are starting to tell our own stories and build up just that wealth of knowledge and support each other. So I'm really excited to be able to contribute, hopefully inspire, and to be a part of some of this work that's happening over there.
I mean, I don't know what to say to that. Well done, well traveled, well spoke.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah. And safe travels to you and congrats on everything that you're doing. It's exciting to see and please keep us posted how we can support.
I will do. Thank you, David.
Yes, sir. Is there anything that you're working on now that we can kind of keep an eye out for? Is there something we should go back and watch that you were a part of?
There are a couple of projects coming out that aren't publicly announced yet.
Okay,
so
for sure.
I'll definitely...
let us know. By the time this episode drops, we should be able to get it out for you.
Yeah, excited to be able to share some of the projects that I've been working on with ILM. So we're connected on social, so for sure I'll let you know once I can talk about them publicly.
Definitely. Well, no, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Post in Black brought to you by the Dolby Institute and Avid. We appreciate you so much. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Follow us on YouTube, social media, IG, and Twitter. And until next time, stay black.